The dust from her father's church still clung to Adelaide Jane's black traveling dress when she threw herself from the borrowed mare and stumbled into the canyon shadows, her lungs burning and her wedding veil torn and trailing behind her like a ghost she desperately wanted to leave behind. She had run, actually run. The reality of it hit her as she pressed her back against the cool red rock wall, her chest heaving, her carefully pinned hair tumbling down around her shoulders in wild auburn waves. Behind her, somewhere in the distance toward Ash Fork, Arizona territory, she could hear the faint sounds of confusion, of her father Reverend Josiah Jameson's voice raised in fury, of Cornelius Whitmore demanding his bride be found. It was April of 1884, and Adelaide had just committed what her father would certainly call the greatest sin of her 20 years of life. The canyon stretched before her, a maze of red stone and shadow, and she had no idea where she was going. She had simply run when the opportunity presented itself, when her father had stepped away during the pre-ceremony preparations to speak with Cornelius about the land deed that would transfer to the church upon their marriage. That was all she was, really. A transaction. A way for her father to secure the funding for his new church building, and for Cornelius, a wealthy 48-year-old mine owner, to secure a young, obedient wife who would give him the children his first wife had failed to provide, before dying under mysterious circumstances that no one in town seemed willing to discuss openly. Adelaide heard the horse before she saw him. Her borrowed mare had already wandered off, spooked by something Adelaide could not see, leaving her stranded on foot. The approaching rider moved slowly through the canyon, and Adelaide pressed herself flatter against the rock, praying he would pass by. Her white petticoats showed beneath her black dress, a beacon against the red stone, and she cursed her father's insistence that she wear the somber colors he deemed appropriate for a preacher's daughter even on her wedding day. The rider stopped. Adelaide held her breath. "You can come out," a male voice called, neither threatening nor particularly welcoming. "Saw you from 50 yards back. Not many places to hide when you are wearing half your weight in fancy clothes." Adelaide considered her options. She had none. She stepped away from the rock, lifting her chin in what she hoped looked like confidence rather than terror. The man who regarded her from atop a dusty buckskin horse was younger than she expected, perhaps 25 or 26, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair that needed cutting. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, his blue shirt faded from washing, his leather vest dusty from travel, and his hat pulled low enough that she could not quite see his eyes. "I am not lost," Adelaide said, which was perhaps the most obvious lie she had ever told. The corner of his mouth twitched, but he did not laugh at her. "Did not figure you were. Women wearing wedding clothes generally know exactly where they are headed, either towards something or away from it." "Away," Adelaide admitted, too exhausted to maintain the pretense. "Definitely away." He nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he already suspected. "Reverend Jameson's daughter. Heard there was a wedding today. Big affair. Whole town invited." "Whole town obligated to attend, you mean," Adelaide corrected bitterly. "My father made sure everyone knew their Christian duty was to witness his daughter's marriage to the town's most generous benefactor. But you had other ideas about your Christian duty." "I had ideas about not being sold like cattle to a man who might have killed his first wife." The words burst out of her, sharp and angry, and she waited for the judgment she had seen on every face in Ash Fork when she dared to question the match. Women did not refuse advantageous marriages. Women did not embarrass their fathers. Women certainly did not run. But the cowboy just studied her for a long moment, then dismounted with an easy grace that spoke of years in the saddle. He was tall, Adelaide noticed, and lean in the way of men who worked hard for their living. "Samuel Pierce," he said, touching the brim of his hat in greeting. "I work the Bar Cross Ranch about 15 miles north of here. I was headed into Prescott for supplies when I decided to cut through the canyon." "Adelaide Jameson," she replied, though he clearly already knew who she was. "And I have nowhere to go." Samuel Pierce looked back the way he had come, then at the sun beginning its descent toward the western horizon, then finally back at Adelaide. She could see his eyes now, a clear gray that seemed to take in every detail of her situation with uncomfortable accuracy. "They will be looking for you. Reverend like your father does not take kindly to being embarrassed in front of the whole town." "I know." Adelaide's voice was smaller now, reality pressing in on her sudden burst of courage. I could not do it. I could not stand there and promise to honor and obey a man I fear to let him." She stopped, her cheeks flushing at the thought of what marriage to Cornelius would have entailed. Samuel nodded once sharply, as if she had confirmed something he suspected. "There is a place," he said slowly. "Deeper in the canyon. Old line shack from when the Bar Cross ran cattle through here. Nobody uses it anymore since we moved operations north. It has a roof and a door that closes, and it is far enough off the main trail that folks would not stumble across it by accident. You would hide me." Adelaide could not quite believe what she was hearing. Men in Ash Fork did not cross Reverend Jameson or Cornelius Whitmore. To do so was to risk your business, your reputation, your standing in the community. "I would give you a place to catch your breath and figure out your next move," Samuel corrected. "Hiding suggests something longer term, and I do not think either of us knows what happens next." It was honest, at least. Adelaide appreciated that after a lifetime of her father's absolute pronouncements about God's will, which always seemed to align perfectly with what benefited him most. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I know this could cause you trouble." Samuel swung back into his saddle and held out his hand. "Trouble seems to be the order of the day. Come on, then. We should move before they expand their search to the canyons." Adelaide took his hand and let him pull her up behind him. She had never ridden this way before, never sat astride a horse with her arms wrapped around a man's waist, her body pressed against his back. Everything about it felt scandalous and dangerous and absolutely necessary. Samuel urged the buckskin forward at a careful pace, navigating the rocky canyon floor with the ease of someone who knew this country well. They rode in silence for nearly half an hour, going deeper into the maze of red rock and twisted juniper. The sun cast long shadows across the canyon walls, painting them in shades of crimson and gold. Adelaide had lived in Arizona Territory for 15 of her 20 years, since her father had brought them west from Ohio after her mother's death. But she had never been allowed to explore beyond the immediate vicinity of Ash Fork. Preachers' daughters did not wander. They did not adventure. They stayed close to home, kept their thoughts pure, and prepared themselves to be good Christian wives. Well, Adelaide thought with a grim sort of satisfaction, she had failed spectacularly at that last part. The line shack appeared around a bend in the canyon wall, tucked back against the rock as if trying to hide itself. It was small, rough lumber construction with a slanted roof and a single window, but it looked solid enough. Samuel dismounted and helped Adelaide down, steadying her when she stumbled on legs cramped from the unaccustomed ride. "Wait here," he said, and approached the shack carefully. Adelaide watched as he checked the door, then disappeared inside. A moment later he emerged, brushing cobwebs from his sleeve. "Empty except for some old furniture and about 100 spiders, but it will do." Inside, the shack was dim and dusty but surprisingly intact. There was a rough bed frame with no mattress, a small table, 2 chairs, and a pot-bellied stove that looked like it might still work. Samuel immediately went to the stove, checking the flue and the firebox with practiced efficiency. "I will need to bring you supplies," he said, more to himself than to her. "Food, blankets, water. Cannot start a fire tonight or someone might see the smoke, but tomorrow, once the search dies down a bit, you should be safe enough." "Samuel," Adelaide said, and waited until he turned to look at her. "Why are you helping me? You do not know me. I could be exactly the kind of trouble my father always warned the young men in his congregation about." He regarded her steadily in the fading light. "I knew Cornelius Whitmore's first wife, Mary. She was kind. She would sneak food to the ranch hands when they were working late, always had a word of encouragement even when Cornelius was riding her hard about the house not being perfect or the meals not being on time. Then one day she had a black eye, then bruises on her arms, then she fell down the stairs and broke her neck, or so Cornelius said." Adelaide felt cold despite the warmth lingering in the small space, and no one questioned it. "Cornelius owns half the mines in the territory and holds mortgages on most of the businesses in Ash Fork. Who was going to question him? The sheriff who he appointed, the judge who he bought, your father who needed his money." Samuel's voice was hard now, edged with old anger. "Mary was 19 when she died. 3 years married to that man, and they killed something in her long before she fell down those stairs." "You cared for her," Adelaide said softly. "She was a good woman who deserved better than what she got. And when I heard Reverend Jameson had arranged for his daughter to marry Cornelius, I thought—" He stopped, shook his head. "I thought it was none of my business, that maybe you wanted the match, wanted the big house and the money and the position. But then I saw you running, and I knew." "Knew what?" "That you were running for your life, even if you did not realize it yet." They looked at each other in the dimming light, and Adelaide felt something shift in her chest, some recognition of a kindred spirit. Samuel Pierce was not like the young men in her father's church who preached about righteousness while judging everyone around them. He was not like Cornelius Whitmore who bought and controlled everything he touched. He was something different, something Adelaide had not known existed in her small, constrained world. "I should get back before full dark," Samuel said, breaking the moment. "I will tell folks at the ranch that I am heading to Prescott early tomorrow. That will give me reason to be gone all day. I will bring you supplies in the morning." "And then what?" Adelaide asked, voicing the question that had been growing in her mind. "Even if I hide for a few days, eventually I will need to leave the territory. My father will never stop looking for me, never forgive me for this. And Cornelius—" She shuddered at the thought of what Cornelius would do if he found her, how he would punish her for the embarrassment she had caused. "Then we figure out how to get you out of the territory," Samuel said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to help a woman he barely knew escape her entire life. "But first, you need to survive the night. There is a canteen on my saddle. I will leave it with you and the horse. I can walk back to the ranch from here." "I cannot take your horse," Adelaide protested. "You might need to run again," Samuel said practically. "And you cannot do that on foot wearing those clothes." He paused at the door, silhouetted against the deep blue of the twilight sky. "Lock the door behind me, do not light a lamp or make noise, and Adelaide—" He turned back to look at her. "You did the right thing, running. Whatever happens next, remember that." Then he was gone, and Adelaide was alone in the gathering darkness with her torn veil, her father's anger, and the first real choice she had ever made for herself. The night was long and filled with unfamiliar sounds. Adelaide had never been truly alone before. In her father's house, there were always servants, always church members coming and going, always her father's heavy presence looming over everything. Here in the canyon, the silence was broken only by the wind moving through the rocks and the occasional cry of some night bird she could not identify. She sat on one of the chairs, her back straight despite her exhaustion, still wearing her wedding dress because she had nothing else. She thought about her father discovering her gone. He would have been furious, not because he loved her and worried for her safety, but because she had embarrassed him in front of the entire town. Reverend Josiah Jameson was a man who valued reputation above all else, who measured righteousness in terms of appearance and position. He had built his church on the backs of people's guilt and fear, and he ruled his household the same way. Adelaide's mother had died when Adelaide was 5, worn down by bearing 4 children in as many years, only one of whom survived past infancy. After her death, Adelaide's father had channeled all his controlling energy into his remaining child, shaping her into what he thought a preacher's daughter should be. But Adelaide had never quite fit the mold. She read books her father did not approve of, borrowed from the home of the doctor's wife who took pity on the lonely girl. She asked questions in Bible study that made her father's face turn red. She struggled with the notion that God wanted women to be silent and submissive when Jesus himself had spoken with the Samaritan woman at the well, had appeared first to Mary Magdalene after the resurrection, had treated women as thinking, feeling human beings rather than property. Her father said she thought too much, that it was dangerous for a woman, that it would make her unmarriageable. He had been right about that last part at least. Adelaide must have dozed eventually, because she woke to morning light streaming through the single window and the sound of a horse outside. For a moment she was disoriented, still half in a dream where she was back in her father's church, walking toward Cornelius with leaden feet. Then she remembered. She had run. She was free. She stood quickly, her body aching from sleeping in a chair, and moved to the window. Samuel was dismounting outside, his saddlebags bulging with supplies. Adelaide unlocked the door and stepped out into the morning sunshine. "You came back," she said, then felt foolish. Of course he had come back. He had said he would, said I would. Samuel began unloading his saddlebags. "Brought food, blankets, a change of clothes that might fit you. They belong to the foreman's daughter. She left them at the ranch house, and I am hoping she will not notice they are gone for a few days. Also brought a hat and a coat. If we need to move you, best if you do not look like a runaway bride." Adelaide helped him carry the supplies inside. The clothes were practical, a simple cotton shirt and a split riding skirt of dark brown, along with worn boots that looked like they might be close to her size. There was also bread, cheese, dried meat, apples, and a canteen full of fresh water. "How much trouble did this cause you?" Adelaide asked as she arranged the supplies on the rickety table. "None yet. Told the foreman I was heading to Prescott and might stay a few days if I ran into some old friends." He barely looked up from his breakfast. Samuel paused, then added, "But there is news from town." Adelaide's stomach tightened. "What news?" "Your father is offering a reward for information leading to your safe return, $50. And Cornelius Whitmore is offering his own reward, $100 for anyone who brings you back to Ash Fork." Samuel's expression was grim. "That is more money than most folks around here see in 6 months. It is going to make things harder. $150. Adelaide felt sick. For that kind of money, people would search every canyon, every abandoned building, every possible hiding place. "How long do you think I have before someone finds this place?" "Hard to say. The canyon is big and the shack is not on any regular trail, but eventually, with that much money on the line, someone will get lucky or persistent." Samuel moved to the window, looking out at the canyon walls. "We need to figure out your next move. Do you have anywhere you could go? Any family outside the territory. My mother's sister lives in California, San Francisco. I have not seen her since I was a child, but she and my father had a falling out after my mother died. She thought he was too harsh with me, wanted to take me to live with her, but he refused. Adelaide had thought of her Aunt Catherine often over the years, had wondered what her life might have been like if she had grown up in the city instead of under her father's rigid control. But I do not know her address, and I have no money for the stage fare to California. Samuel was quiet for a long moment, thinking. When he spoke, his words were careful, considered. The Bar Cross drives cattle to California every fall. It is only May now, but we will be heading out in October with a herd headed for the railhead outside Los Angeles. From there, San Francisco is not far. October is 5 months away, Adelaide said. I cannot hide in this shack for 5 months. And even if I could, you cannot keep bringing me supplies without someone noticing. Samuel, I appreciate what you have done, truly, but I think I need to accept that I will need to turn myself in and face whatever comes next. No. The word was flat, final. Samuel turned from the window to face her. You do not know what you are saying. Cornelius Whitmore is not the kind of man who forgives an insult, and you humiliated him in front of the entire town. If you go back, your father will force you to marry him immediately, and then Cornelius will own you completely. He can do anything he wants to you, and it will be legal. Do you understand that? Anything. Adelaide did understand. She had heard the whispers about what went on in the Whitmore house when the doors were closed. How Mary Whitmore had stopped attending church the last few months of her life, how she had become a ghost of herself. Then what do you suggest? I cannot stay here and I cannot go back. There is another option, Samuel said slowly. It is not perfect, but it might buy us the time we need. There are homesteads deeper in the territory, isolated places where folks do not ask too many questions about people's pasts. I know of a widow woman, Ruth Holloway, who runs a small ranch about 60 miles northwest of here. She is always looking for help, especially someone who can read and write and help with the accounts. I could take you there, introduce you as my cousin from back east who is looking for work. You would be safe there while we figure out a more permanent solution. Why would this woman take in a stranger on your word? Adelaide asked. And what makes you think she would not just turn me in for the reward money? Ruth Holloway is not motivated by money. She has enough land and cattle to keep herself comfortable, and she is about as independent as a woman can be in this territory. Her husband died 10 years back, and instead of remarrying or selling out like everyone expected, she learned to run the ranch herself. She is tough as old leather and does not give a damn about what the preacher in Ash Fork thinks about anything. Samuel almost smiled. You would probably like her. It was a risk, but then again, everything was a risk now. Adelaide thought about her options, which were limited to this gamble or returning to a life that would destroy her slowly or quickly, but would destroy her nonetheless. When could we leave? Tomorrow morning, early. I will tell the ranch I am going to Prescott, then double back here. We will take the eastern trails, stay off the main roads. It will take us 3 days, maybe 4, but we should be able to avoid anyone looking for you. Samuel checked the position of the sun through the window. I need to get back before my absence is noticed. Will you be all right here for another night? Adelaide looked around the small shack, at the supplies Samuel had brought, at the practical clothes that represented a kind of freedom she had never experienced. I will be fine. Samuel, I do not know how to thank you for this. Do not thank me yet, he said. We have not gotten you to safety. That is when you can thank me. After he left, Adelaide changed into the borrowed clothes. It felt strange to wear trousers, even the split skirt style that was considered more acceptable for women. She had always worn her father's prescribed modest dresses, her collars buttoned high, her sleeves long, her body hidden and shapeless under layers of fabric. These clothes were practical, designed for movement and work rather than concealment. She braided her long auburn hair and pinned it tightly to her head, then tried on the hat Samuel had brought. Looking at her reflection in the small mirror she found in one of the saddlebags, she barely recognized herself. She looked, Adelaide thought with wonder, like someone who might have choices. The day passed slowly. Adelaide ate sparingly from the supplies, not knowing how long they would need to last. She found a broom in the corner and swept out the shack, more for something to do than because cleanliness mattered. She tried not to think about her father, about how he was probably preaching about her disobedience to anyone who would listen, casting her as the ungrateful daughter who rejected God's plan for her life. She tried not to think about Cornelius, about the cold anger she had seen in his pale blue eyes the few times she had dared to look directly at him during their forced courtship. Instead, she thought about Samuel Pierce, about the quiet way he had helped her without asking for anything in return. She thought about the pain in his voice when he spoke of Mary Whitmore, the conviction in his words when he told Adelaide she had done the right thing. He was different from any man she had known, and Adelaide found herself wanting to know more about him. Where had he come from? What had brought him to Arizona Territory? Did he have family, dreams, plans for a future that involved more than cowboying for the bar cross? She told herself these questions were just a way to pass the time, that her curiosity was natural given the circumstances. She did not let herself think about the way her heart had beat faster when he took her hand to help her onto the horse, or the solid warmth of his back when she rode behind him through the canyon. She was running from one man. The last thing she needed was to complicate her situation by developing feelings for another. But that night, lying on the floor wrapped in the blankets Samuel had brought, Adelaide let herself imagine a different life. A life where she was not the preacher's daughter, where she could make her own choices, where she might meet a man who saw her as an equal rather than property. A life where she could be Adelaide, just Adelaide, without the weight of her father's expectations or Cornelius's ownership. It seemed like an impossible dream, but then again, 24 hours ago she would have said escaping her own wedding was impossible too. Samuel arrived just after dawn, as promised. Adelaide was already awake, dressed in the traveling clothes, the few supplies packed and ready. He looked tired, she noticed, as if he had not slept well. "Any trouble?" she asked as he helped her secure her bedroll behind his saddle. "Some." The foreman asked more questions than I expected about my trip to Prescott. I think he might suspect something, but he has no proof. Samuel checked the cinch on his saddle, then swung up. "We need to move fast and stay off the main trails. There are search parties out looking for you, and with the reward money being offered, we cannot trust anyone we meet." Adelaide took his offered hand and settled herself behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. It felt more natural today, less scandalous, though her awareness of his solid presence had not diminished. They rode out of the canyon as the sun painted the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold, heading northwest into territory Adelaide had never seen. The land changed as they traveled, the red rock giving way to high desert scrub, dotted with juniper and pinyon pine. They stayed away from settlements, avoiding even the small ranch houses that appeared occasionally in the distance. Samuel seemed to know every trail and game path, navigating by the sun and the shape of the distant mountains. They did not talk much while riding, saving their energy for the journey, but when they stopped to rest the horses and eat, Adelaide found herself asking the questions that had filled her mind the day before. "How long have you been in Arizona Territory?" she asked, sitting in the shade of a twisted juniper while Samuel watered the horses. 4 years. Came out from Texas after my father died. He had a small ranch there, but it went to my older brother by tradition. I could have stayed and worked for him, but we never saw eye to eye on much. Samuel settled beside her, his hat tipped back, his eyes scanning the horizon in a way that suggested constant vigilance. Cowboying seemed like a way to see the country make my own way. Do you like it? The work, I mean. He considered the question seriously. It is honest work, hard but honest. I like being outside, like working with horses and cattle. The bar cross is a good outfit, fair wages and decent treatment, but it is not what I want to do forever. What do you want to do? Adelaide asked, genuinely curious. Have my own place someday. Nothing big, just enough land to run a small herd, maybe grow some crops. Build a house that is actually mine. He glanced at her, then away. Probably sounds simple. It sounds wonderful, Adelaide said honestly. Knowing what you want, working toward it, I have never had that. Everything has always been decided for me. Where I live, what I wear, how I spend my days, who I should marry. Running away is the first real decision I have made in my entire life. That cannot be true, Samuel said. You must have made choices. Small ones, maybe. What book to read when my father was not watching. Whether to add sugar to my tea, but nothing that mattered, nothing that shaped my life. She picked at the dry grass beside her. Do you know what Cornelius told me the one time my father left us alone together? He said that once we were married, I would not need to think anymore, that he would make all the decisions and my job was simply to obey and bear his children. He said it like it was a gift he was giving me, relief from the burden of choice. Samuel's jaw tightened. And your father agreed to this marriage. My father arranged this marriage. To him, wifely obedience is not just proper, it is godly. He believes women are inherently weak and sinful, that we need the constant guidance of fathers and husbands to keep us on the righteous path. Adelaide heard the bitterness in her own voice. I do not think he sees women as fully human, to be honest. We are just tools to be used in service of men's goals and God's will, which according to him are usually the same thing. They sat in silence for a while, and Adelaide worried she had said too much, revealed too much of the anger and hurt she usually kept carefully hidden. But when Samuel spoke again, his voice was thoughtful rather than judgmental. My mother was the one who taught me to read, he said. My father thought education was wasted on ranch kids who just needed to know how to rope and ride, but my mother insisted. She had been a school teacher before she married, and she believed that everyone deserved to learn. She taught me reading and writing and arithmetic, but she also taught me to think, to question, to not just accept things because that was how they had always been done. He smiled slightly, lost in memory. My father complained about it, said she was making me soft, but she never stopped. And after she died when I was 12, I understood that she had given me a gift, the ability to choose my own path because I could think for myself. She sounds remarkable, Adelaide said. She was, and she would have liked you, I think. Would have approved of you running, making your own choice even when it was hard. He stood, offering Adelaide his hand. We should keep moving. Want to make it to the Prescott Valley by nightfall. They rode through the afternoon, the sun beating down from a cloudless sky. Adelaide had never spent so many hours on horseback, and her body ached from the unfamiliar position. But she did not complain. This discomfort was temporary, and it was leading her toward something better than the life she had left behind. As the sun began to descend toward the western horizon, they came to a small creek lined with cottonwood trees. Samuel followed it for a mile or so, before finding a spot where the trees and undergrowth provided good cover. We will camp here tonight, he said, dismounting. I will get a fire going, make some coffee. You should rest." Adelaide slid down from the horse, her legs trembling as they took her weight. Samuel caught her arm, steadying her. "Sorry," she said, embarrassed by her weakness. "I am not used to riding so much." "You are doing fine," Samuel said. "Most people who have never ridden would not last an hour. You have been in the saddle for 10. While Samuel tended the horse and built a small fire, Adelaide walked down to the creek to wash her face and hands. The water was cold and clear, running fast from snowmelt in the distant mountains. She splashed it over her face, letting it wash away the dust and sweat of the day. When she looked up, she caught her reflection in a still pool beside the main current. The woman looking back at her was sunburned and tired, her hair escaping its braid, her borrowed clothes dusty and wrinkled. But her eyes, Adelaide noticed, were different than they had been 2 days ago. Brighter, more alive. When she returned to the fire, Samuel had coffee brewing and was heating beans in a small pan. "Not fancy," he said, "but it will keep us going." They ate in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Adelaide had never been alone with a man like this, certainly had never spent a night camping with one. Her father would have been apoplectic at the impropriety, but Adelaide found that she did not care. Whatever damage the last 2 days had done to her reputation was irreparable anyway. She might as well enjoy the freedom that came with being ruined. "Tell me about this woman, Ruth Holloway," Adelaide said as they finished their meal. "What is she like? Tough, fair. Does not suffer fools or lazy workers." She lost her husband in a range war about 10 years back, and everyone expected her to sell the ranch and move back east. Instead, she hired a good foreman, learned everything she could about running cattle, and made it work. Samuel poured himself another cup of coffee. "She has a sharp tongue and no patience for nonsense, but she is decent to the people who work for her. Pays fair wages, does not cheat on supplies, and she has helped more than one person who needed a fresh start, no questions asked." "Why would she do that? Help strangers, I mean." "Because someone helped her once, or so I have heard. Before she married Holloway, she was in some kind of trouble back in Missouri. He brought her west, gave her a new life. I think she figures she owes it to pass that kindness forward." Samuel glanced at Adelaide across the fire. "She will understand why you ran, maybe better than most." Adelaide absorbed this. "What will you tell her about me? About us?" "The truth, mostly. That you are a preacher's daughter running from a forced marriage to a dangerous man. That I am helping you because it is the right thing to do. She will either decide to help or she will not, but Ruth Holloway appreciates honesty. And if she decides not to help," Samuel was quiet for a moment, "then we figure something else out. But Adelaide, I am not going to let you fall back into Cornelius Whitmore's hands. Whatever it takes, we will find you a safe place." The certainty in his voice made something warm unfurl in Adelaide's chest. She studied him in the firelight, this man who had disrupted his own life to help her, who asked nothing in return except that she stay safe. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why are you doing all this for me? And please do not say it is just because of Mary Whitmore. This is more than that." Samuel met her eyes across the fire. For a long moment he did not speak, and Adelaide thought he might not answer. Then he said, "Because when I saw you in that canyon, running in your wedding dress, you looked exactly like I felt when I left Texas. Desperate and scared and brave all at once. Because I have watched too many people in my life get trapped in situations they could not escape, and I swore that, if I ever had the chance to help someone get free, I would take it. And because—" He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. "Because from the moment I saw you, I knew I could not live with myself if I let them drag you back." Adelaide could not look away from him. In the firelight, with his guard down, Samuel Pierce was perhaps the most genuine person she had ever met. No pretense, no performance, just honest feeling honestly expressed. It was so different from everything she had known in her father's world of careful presentations and hidden motivations. "Thank you," she said, and meant it with her whole heart. "For seeing me, for helping me, for believing I deserved better." "You do deserve better," Samuel said. "You deserve to choose your own life." They sat by the fire until it burned down to embers, talking about small things and large ones, about books they had read and places they had never seen but dreamed of visiting. Adelaide learned that Samuel loved horses more than cattle, that he had once broken his arm falling out of a tree while trying to rescue a cat, that he thought most preachers were hypocrites, but still believed in something bigger than himself. She told him about her mother, the few memories she had of a woman with kind eyes and gentle hands, about the loneliness of growing up as the only child of a man who saw her as a burden and a tool. She told him about the books she had hidden under her bed, the dreams she had never dared to speak aloud, the plans she had started making months ago when her father first announced her engagement to Cornelius. "You have been planning this," Samuel said with something like admiration. "The running. This was not just a spur-of-the-moment decision. I have been planning to run since the day my father told me about the engagement," Adelaide admitted. "I just did not know when or how. I have been stealing small amounts of money from the household accounts for weeks, hiding it in my Bible where I knew my father would never look, because he assumed I read it as devotedly as he demanded. I arranged to have the horse waiting near the church. I practiced changing clothes quickly, timing how long it would take me to get from the church to the edge of town. The only thing I did not plan for was what came after, where I would go, how I would survive. I just knew I had to get away." "You are braver than you think," Samuel said. "Or more desperate," Adelaide replied. But she smiled a little as she said it. They laid out their bedrolls on opposite sides of the dying fire, proper and respectful. But as Adelaide lay looking up at the stars scattered across the vast Arizona sky, she found herself acutely aware of Samuel's presence just yards away, of the sound of his breathing, of the strange new feeling that she was not alone anymore. For the first time in her life, she had an ally. Someone on her side. It was a revelation almost as significant as her escape itself. The second day of riding was harder than the first. Adelaide's entire body ached, muscles she did not know she had protesting the constant movement of the horse. But she gritted her teeth and endured, determined not to slow them down. Samuel noticed anyway. "We can rest more often if you need," he offered as they stopped to water the horse at midday. "I am fine," Adelaide said, which was a lie but a necessary one. "How much farther to Ruth Halloway's ranch? If we push hard today, we can make it by tomorrow afternoon." "But Adelaide, there is no shame in admitting you need rest. You are not used to this kind of travel." "Which is exactly why I need to get used to it," Adelaide said firmly. "If I am going to make it to California eventually, I need to learn to ride properly. So I appreciate your concern, but please, let us keep going." Samuel looked like he wanted to argue, but he just nodded. As they rode through the afternoon, he started teaching her, calling instructions over his shoulder about how to sit, how to move with the horse rather than against it, how to use her legs to signal direction. Adelaide listened and tried to implement what he said, and by the time they stopped for the evening, she felt slightly less like a sack of flour being transported and slightly more like an actual rider. They camped that night in a canyon not unlike the one where Adelaide had first hidden, and after they ate, Samuel tended to Adelaide's rope-burned hands and saddle-sore legs with a matter-of-fact competence that made her feel cared for in a way she had never experienced. Her father's version of care had always been conditional, dependent on her obedience and usefulness. Samuel's help came with no strings attached, no lectures about how she should be grateful, no reminders of how much trouble she was causing. "You are getting better at this," Samuel said as he wrapped a clean bandage around her palm where the rains had rubbed it raw. "By the time we reach Ruth's place, you will be a passable rider." "Passable," Adelaide repeated with a wry smile. "Such high praise. I am a cowboy." We do not give out compliments lightly about horsemanship. But his eyes were warm with humor. "Besides, you have gone from never riding to covering over 100 miles in 2 days. That is more than passable. That is impressive." Adelaide felt an absurd flush of pleasure at the praise. "Well, I have good motivation to learn, and a patient teacher." They were sitting close together, Samuel still holding her hand as he tied off the bandage, and Adelaide found herself studying his face in the firelight. He had a good face, she thought. Strong and honest, weathered by sun and work but young enough that he smiled easily. His hands, rough and calloused from years of hard labor, were surprisingly gentle as they handled her injuries. Everything about Samuel Pierce spoke of capability and steadiness, qualities Adelaide had not known she valued until she found herself dependent on them. "Samuel," she said softly, "what happens when we reach Ruth Holloway's ranch? I mean, after you introduce me as your cousin. Will you stay, or will you need to return to the Bar Cross?" "I will need to go back eventually," he said. "I cannot just abandon my job without notice. But I will stay long enough to make sure you are settled, that Ruth agrees to take you on, that you feel safe there." He hesitated, then added, "I know this situation is not ideal. You are used to running a household, not working as hired help on someone else's ranch, but it is safer than staying near Ash Fork." "I am not afraid of work," Adelaide said. "I have been running my father's household since I was 14 years old. Cooking, cleaning, managing servants, keeping accounts. The only difference is that at Ruth's ranch, I will be paid for my labor instead of just expected to provide it as my daughterly duty." She paused. "And I will not have to marry anyone I do not want to marry." "Ruth will not force you into anything," Samuel assured her. "That much I can promise. She has strong opinions about people making their own choices." On the third day, they saw their first sign of other people since leaving the canyon. A small ranch appeared in a valley below them, smoke rising from the chimney, cattle grazing in fenced pastures. Samuel studied it for a long moment before circling wide around it, keeping to the high ground. "You think they are looking for me?" Adelaide asked. "Better not to take chances," Samuel replied. "For all we know, news of the reward has spread this far already. $150 would change a lot of lives out here." The reminder sobered Adelaide. She had been so focused on the immediate journey that she had almost forgotten she was a wanted woman, that her father and Cornelius had the money and influence to ensure people kept looking for her. "What will happen when you go back to the Bar Cross?" she asked. "Will they suspect you helped me?" "Possibly, probably. But suspicion is not proof, and I will have the cover story of going to Prescott. As long as no one saw us together, I should be all right." Samuel glanced back at her. "But Adelaide, you need to understand that helping you could cost me my job, maybe more. If Cornelius or your father figures out I was involved, they could make sure I never work in this territory again." "Then why risk it?" Adelaide asked, not for the first time. "Samuel, you have already done so much. If you leave me at Ruth's ranch and go back now, you could probably still claim plausible deniability. But the longer you stay with me, the harder that becomes." "I know," Samuel said simply, "and I am staying anyway." They reached Ruth Holloway's ranch just before sunset on the fourth day. Adelaide was exhausted, filthy and sore in ways she had not known were possible, but she had never felt more awake, more present in her own life. The ranch was larger than Adelaide expected, a sprawling collection of buildings in a green valley watered by a year-round creek. Cattle grazed across the hills, and Adelaide could see several cowboys working in the distance, driving a small herd toward the barn. The main house was a solid adobe structure with a wide porch and real glass windows, speaking of prosperity and permanence. As they approached, a woman emerged from the house, rifle in hand but pointed at the ground. She was in her late 40s, Adelaide guessed, with graying brown hair pulled back in a severe bun and a face that spoke of hard work and harder decisions. She wore practical men's trousers and a faded shirt, and she moved with the confidence of someone completely at home in her own domain. "Samuel Pierce," the woman said as they dismounted. Her voice was gravelly, the product of years of shouting orders across windy prairies. "Did not expect to see you this far north. Bar Cross giving you time off." "Something like that," Samuel said. He helped Adelaide down from the horse, steadying her when her legs nearly gave out. "Ruth Halloway, this is Adelaide Jameson. Adelaide Ruth Halloway." Ruth's sharp eyes took in Adelaide's rumpled appearance, the two large borrowed clothes, the exhausted set of her shoulders. "Jameson," she said slowly. "As in Reverend Josiah Jameson from Ash Fork," his daughter, Samuel confirmed. "She is in trouble and needs help." "Can we come inside and explain?" Ruth studied them both for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she leaned her rifle against the porch railing and nodded. "Come on then. You both look like you could use food and coffee while you tell me why a preacher's daughter is showing up at my ranch looking like she just rode through hell." Inside, the house was clean and comfortable without being fancy. Ruth directed them to sit at a large wooden table in the kitchen while she put coffee on to boil and pulled out leftover stew from the previous night's dinner. She worked with efficient economy of movement, asking no questions until they were all sitting down with hot food and strong coffee. "All right," Ruth said, leaning back in her chair and fixing them with a direct look. "Start talking." Samuel looked at Adelaide, giving her the choice to tell her own story. Adelaide took a breath and began. She told Ruth about her father's arrangement with Cornelius Whitmore, about Mary Whitmore's suspicious death, about her decision to run from the wedding. She explained how Samuel had found her in the canyon and helped her escape, about the reward money being offered for her return. She was honest about the danger she might bring to Ruth's ranch, about the fact that she had no money and no family who would help her, about her desperate hope of eventually reaching her aunt in California. Ruth listened without interrupting, her weathered face giving nothing away. When Adelaide finished, Ruth took a long sip of her coffee and said, "Cornelius Whitmore is a son of a bitch. Knew his first wife a little. She came here once buying a cow. Had that look about her, like a bird with a broken wing. I offered to help then, but she said no, she was fine, everything was fine." Ruth's voice was hard. "Found out a month later she was dead, always regretted not pushing harder." "So you will help Adelaide?" Samuel asked. "Did not say that yet," Ruth replied. "Helping her means making an enemy of Whitmore and the Reverend, means risking trouble with the law if they decide to push it. I have a ranch to run and people depending on me. I cannot make that decision lightly." She turned her attention to Adelaide. "Why should I take this risk for you? What can you offer me besides trouble?" Adelaide met Ruth's eyes steadily. "I can read, write, and do mathematics. I have run my father's household for 6 years, managing accounts, planning meals, organizing supplies, supervising staff. I am not afraid of hard work and I learn quickly. If you need someone to help with the bookkeeping or household management or anything else, I can do it. And if you give me a chance, I swear I will earn my keep and then some." "Pretty speech," Ruth said, But what about when it gets hard? When you are cleaning chicken coops instead of managing servants? When your hands are raw from scrubbing pots? When you realize that working for wages is not the same as being the mistress of the house? Then my hands will be raw, Adelaide said simply. I am not running because I am afraid of work, Mrs. Halloway. I am running because I am afraid of losing myself completely to a man who would treat me like property. I would rather scrub pots until my hands bleed than be Cornelius Whitmore's wife. Ruth studied her for another long moment, then suddenly smiled, a quick flash of approval. Good answer. And it is just Ruth, none of this Mrs. Halloway nonsense. I stopped being a missus when my husband died, and I am too old to care about social niceties. She stood, collecting the empty dishes. You can stay. I will pay you $20 a month plus room and board. You will help my housekeeper with the cooking and cleaning, manage the accounts like you said, and do whatever other work needs doing. In return, you get a safe place to stay and time to figure out your next move. Deal. Adelaide felt tears prick her eyes. Deal. Thank you, Ruth. I cannot tell you what this means to me. Do not thank me yet. Wait until you have been here a month and see if you still feel grateful. But Ruth's tone was more amused than stern. She looked at Samuel. I assume you need to head back to the bar cross. Not yet, Samuel said. I told them I might be gone a week. Figured I should stay a few days, make sure Adelaide is settled, help out around here if you need an extra hand. Ruth's knowing eyes moved between Samuel and Adelaide, seeing more than either of them had put into words. I see. Well, I can always use an extra hand with the horses. We have several that need breaking. You are welcome to stay in the bunkhouse with the other cowboys. Her tone made it clear that this arrangement was not up for negotiation, that whatever was or was not happening between Samuel and Adelaide would happen in plain sight and with proper respect for appearances. Ruth set Adelaide up in a small room off the kitchen, clean and simple, with a real bed and a window that looked out toward the distant mountains. After days of sleeping on the ground, the bed felt impossibly luxurious. Ruth provided her with proper clothes, work dresses that fit better than the borrowed riding clothes, and showed her around the house and outbuildings. The ranch employed 6 full-time cowboys, plus a foreman named Jack Cartwright who had been with Ruth since her husband died. There was also Rosa, a Mexican woman in her 50s who served as housekeeper and cook, and her teenage son Miguel, who helped with the horses. They all accepted Adelaide's presence without much comment. Ruth simply introduced her as someone who would be helping around the house, and that seemed to be enough explanation for people who clearly trusted Ruth's judgment. Over the next few days, Adelaide threw herself into the work. She helped Rosa with cooking and cleaning, though Rosa's competence in the kitchen quickly made it clear she did not really need help. She organized the ranch accounts, which had been kept haphazardly in a collection of ledgers and loose papers, creating a system that made it easy to track income and expenses. She mended clothes, tended the vegetable garden, fed chickens, and did 100 other small tasks that needed doing around a working ranch. And she watched Samuel work with the horses. He was, Adelaide discovered, extraordinary with them. Patient and calm, able to read their moods and respond appropriately, never forcing them but somehow convincing them to trust him. She would find excuses to be near the corral where he worked, ostensibly hanging laundry or collecting eggs, but really just watching the way he moved, the quiet confidence in every gesture. And sometimes she would catch him watching her too, their eyes meeting across the yard before one of them looked away. On his 4th evening at the ranch, Samuel found Adelaide sitting on the porch after dinner, looking out at the sunset painting the mountains gold and purple. He lowered himself onto the step beside her, keeping a respectful distance but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cooling evening air. "You are doing well here," he said. "Ruth told me today that you have been invaluable. Said you organized 10 years of accounts in 3 days and found several discrepancies that were costing her money." Adelaide smiled. "I like the work. I like feeling useful in a way that is acknowledged and appreciated. Ruth actually thanks me when I do something well. That is a novel experience." "You never got thanked for running your father's household. It was expected. Duty. Women in my father's world do not get thanked for doing their duty any more than you would thank a horse for carrying you where you need to go." Adelaide drew her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. "Here it is different. The work is harder physically, but it is honest. No one is pretending I am not working or that my work does not matter. Ruth pays me wages. That feels revolutionary." Samuel was quiet for a moment, then said, "I need to head back to the bar cross tomorrow. I have already been gone longer than I planned, and if I stay away any longer, it will raise too many questions." Adelaide had known this was coming, but hearing the words still felt like a punch to her stomach. In the few days they had been at Ruth's ranch, Samuel had become a constant, reassuring presence. The idea of him leaving filled her with an anxiety she did not want to examine too closely. "Will you come back?" she asked, then immediately regretted the question. It sounded desperate, clingy. "I mean, will you visit? Or will it be too dangerous to maintain contact?" "I will come back," Samuel said firmly. "Ruth's ranch is far enough from Ash Fork that I can explain visits as business or friendship with the foreman. And Adelaide, I am not just going to abandon you here. We are not done figuring out how to get you to California." "The cattle drive," Adelaide said, remembering. "In October. In October. That is still 5 months away, which gives us time to plan properly, to save money, to make sure you have everything you need for the journey." Samuel turned to look at her directly. "This is not goodbye. This is just me going back to work for a while." Adelaide wanted to believe him, but fear gnawed at her. What if something happened? What if her father or Cornelius tracked him down? What if the ranch foreman figured out he had been helping her? What if he went back to the bar cross and realized that helping a runaway preacher's daughter was more trouble than it was worth? Samuel must have read some of this on her face, because he reached out and took her hand, his rough palm warm against hers. "Hey," he said softly. "I promise you, I am coming back. You are not alone in this anymore, Adelaide. You have Ruth and you have me, and we are going to figure this out together." Adelaide looked down at their joined hands, at the way his fingers had curled around hers, protective and sure. When had this stopped being about him helping a stranger in trouble? When had it become something more? "I should not ask you to keep risking yourself for me," she said quietly. "This is my problem, my mess. You have already done more than anyone could expect." "Adelaide." Samuel waited until she looked up at him. In the fading light, his eyes were very serious. "You are not a problem or a mess. You are a brave woman who made the hardest choice of her life, and I am honored to help you. And if I am being honest, this stopped being just about helping a stranger about 2 days into our ride here." Adelaide's heart was beating very fast. "What do you mean?" "I mean that somewhere between hiding you in that canyon and teaching you to ride and sitting around campfires talking about everything and nothing, I started caring about you. Not as a stranger in need or a good deed to be done, but as you. Adelaide." His thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand. "I know the timing is terrible. I know you just escaped one man and probably have no interest in another one. I know we barely know each other in any conventional sense. But I needed to tell you before I leave, so you understand why I am coming back." Adelaide could barely breathe. No one had ever spoken to her like this, with such straightforward honesty about feelings. In her father's world, love was not discussed openly. Marriage was arranged, duty was emphasized, but actual human emotion was considered unseemly, especially when expressed by women. She had no model for how to respond to Samuel's declaration. "I do not know what to say," she admitted. "I have never. No one has ever." She stopped, frustrated by her inability to articulate what she was feeling. "Samuel, 3 weeks ago I was preparing to marry a man I despised, because I had been taught my entire life that my feelings did not matter, that a good Christian woman submitted to male authority without question. Now I am here, wearing trousers and managing accounts and learning that I can make decisions for myself. And you are telling me that you care about me, and I do not even know what that means or how I am supposed to feel about it." "You are not supposed to feel any particular way," Samuel said gently. "I am just telling you how I feel. You do not have to reciprocate or respond or do anything. I just wanted you to know so when I come back in a few weeks, you understand why." "But I do feel something," Adelaide said, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess them. "When you are around, I feel safer. When you teach me things or talk to me like I am an actual person with thoughts worth hearing, I feel seen in a way I never have before. When you told me you were leaving tomorrow, I felt like the ground was dropping out from under me. I do not know if that is what caring about someone feels like, because I have never been allowed to care about anyone in that way. But if it is, then yes, I care about you too." They looked at each other in the deepening twilight, and Adelaide felt the moment stretch and expand, heavy with possibility. Then Samuel smiled, slow and warm and genuine, and squeezed her hand. "Then I will definitely be coming back," he said. He left the next morning at dawn, and Adelaide stood on the porch watching him ride away until he disappeared over the first rise. Ruth came to stand beside her, 2 cups of coffee in hand, and passed one to Adelaide without comment. "He is a good man," Ruth said after a while. "The kind who means what he says and says what he means. Those are rare." "I know," Adelaide said softly. "But you are smart to take things slow. You just got out of one situation where a man tried to control your life. Do not rush into anything new until you are sure of what you want." Ruth sipped her coffee. "Though for what it is worth, I have known Samuel Pierce for 3 years, and I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Like you are something precious he is afraid to break." Adelaide did not know what to say to that. So she just stood and drank her coffee and watched the empty horizon and tried not to count the days until Samuel said he would return. The days turned into weeks, and Adelaide fell into the rhythm of ranch life. She discovered she was good at the work, that there was satisfaction in accomplishing tangible tasks, in seeing the results of her labor. The accounts she organized saved Ruth money. The meals she helped Rosa prepare were eaten and appreciated. The mending she did kept the cowboys from wearing clothes with holes. It was simple work in many ways, but it mattered, and Adelaide had never realized how much she needed to do work that mattered. Ruth was a tough boss, but a fair one, quick to correct mistakes, but equally quick to acknowledge good work. She treated Adelaide as an employee rather than a charity case, which Adelaide appreciated more than she could express. And slowly, carefully, they developed a friendship built on mutual respect and the kind of understanding that came from 2 women who had both fought for their independence in a world designed to deny it. 3 weeks after Samuel left, a stranger rode into the ranch asking questions. Adelaide was in the kitchen when Rosa came to get her, her usually calm face tight with worry. "There is a man asking Ruth about a runaway girl," Rosa said quietly. "Says he is looking for the daughter of a preacher, says there is reward money. I think you should stay inside, stay away from the windows." Adelaide's heart dropped into her stomach. She had known this might happen, but the abstract fear suddenly became concrete reality. What is Ruth telling him? I do not know, but she sent me to warn you, so she must not trust him. Adelaide moved away from the window, pressing herself against the wall where she could not be seen from outside. She could hear voices on the porch, Ruth's gravelly tones and a man's higher pitch, but could not make out words. The conversation seemed to go on forever, and Adelaide felt sweat break out between her shoulder blades despite the cool dimness of the kitchen. Finally, she heard boots on the porch steps, then the sound of a horse being mounted and ridden away. Ruth came inside a few minutes later, her face grim. "Bounty hunter," she said without preamble. "One of those men who chase rewards for a living. He had a description of you, not very detailed but enough. I told him no one matching that description had come through here, that I would keep an eye out and contact him if I saw anything." She looked at Adelaide seriously. "He believed me, I think. But Adelaide, you need to understand that there will be more like him. Cornelius Whitmore is serious about finding you, and he has the money to keep men looking for a long time." "Maybe I should leave," Adelaide said, fear making her voice tight. "I should not bring this danger to your door." "You are not going anywhere," Ruth said firmly. "I took you in knowing the risks, but we do need to be smarter about this. For the next few weeks, you should stay close to the house. Avoid being seen by strangers. If anyone asks, you are Rosa's niece from Mexico, here to help with the housework. Your Spanish is terrible, but we can say you grew up in Texas and never learned properly." It was a good cover story, and Adelaide agreed immediately. For the next 2 weeks, she barely left the house except after dark. She helped Rosa with the indoor work, practiced her limited Spanish, and tried not to let fear overwhelm her. But the visit had reminded her that she was not truly safe, that her father and Cornelius would not give up easily. Samuel returned on a Sunday afternoon in late June, nearly a month after he had left. Adelaide was in the garden, weeding the vegetables in the relative cool of early evening when she heard hoofbeats. She looked up and felt her heart leap when she recognized the buckskin horse and its rider. She stood, brushing dirt from her hands, suddenly acutely aware of how she must look in her work dress, her hair escaping its braid, her face probably red from the sun and exertion. But Samuel's face lit up when he saw her, and he dismounted before the horse had even fully stopped. "Adelaide," he said, and the way he said her name, full of warmth and relief, made her forget her disheveled appearance. "You came back," she said unnecessarily. "I told you I would." He closed the distance between them but stopped just short of touching her, as if uncertain of his welcome. "Is everything all right? I came as soon as I could get away." Adelaide wanted to throw herself at him, to feel his solid presence, to reassure herself that he was really here. But she was aware of the ranch hands working nearby, of Rosa probably watching from the kitchen window. So she just smiled and said, "Everything is fine. Well, mostly fine. There was a bounty hunter a few weeks ago, but Ruth sent him away." Samuel's expression darkened. "Did he see you?" "No, I hid inside and Ruth told him I was not here. But Samuel, there will be others. Cornelius is not going to give up. I know. We need to talk about that, about the plan going forward. But first I should go speak with Ruth, let her know I am here." He reached out and briefly squeezed Adelaide's hand, a quick touch that sent warmth flooding through her. "I am glad you are safe." Over dinner that evening, with Ruth, Adelaide, Samuel, and the foreman Jack Cartwright gathered around the kitchen table, they discussed the situation. Samuel reported that talk of the runaway bride had died down somewhat in Ash Fork, but that Cornelius was still offering the reward and seemed determined to find Adelaide. The general assumption in town was that she had either died in the desert or made it to one of the mining camps and disappeared into the rough population there. "I have been thinking about the October cattle drive," Samuel said. "I requested to be part of the crew that takes the Bar Cross herd west." The foreman approved it. "The trail takes us through some remote country, and there will be opportunities to slip away without being noticed, especially once we are far from Arizona territory. I could take Adelaide with me, disguised as a drover. Once we reach California, she can make her way to San Francisco." Ruth leaned back in her chair, considering. "It is risky. If anyone recognizes her along the way, you would both be in serious trouble, and cattle drives are hard, dangerous work." "No offense, Adelaide, but you have been here 2 months and you are still learning to ride properly. Can you handle weeks on the trail, long days in the saddle, bad weather, river crossings, all of that?" "I can learn," Adelaide said firmly. "I have 4 months before October. Teach me what I need to know and I will be ready." Samuel and Ruth exchanged a look. "It would mean serious training," Samuel said. "Not just riding, but roping, working with cattle, all the skills you would need to pass as a drover. And it would mean working hard, pushing yourself." "I am not afraid of hard work," Adelaide said. "And it is the best plan we have. Better than staying here indefinitely hoping no one recognizes me or trying to make a run for California on my own." "She is right," Ruth said grudgingly. "Much as I hate to admit it, the cattle drive might be her best chance. And Samuel, you will look out for her." "With my life," Samuel said simply, so it was decided. For the rest of the summer, Adelaide trained. Samuel came to Ruth's ranch as often as he could, sometimes staying for days, teaching Adelaide everything he knew about cowboying. She learned to rope, to cut cattle from a herd, to predict what the animals would do and how to respond. She learned to build fires in the rain, to cook over an open flame, to identify edible plants and dangerous snakes. She learned to shoot, though she was a terrible shot at first, and to care for a horse in the field. She learned to sleep on the ground without complaining, to ignore discomfort and fatigue, to keep going when every muscle ached. And through it all, she and Samuel grew closer. They would work all day, Adelaide pushing herself to master new skills while Samuel taught her with patient encouragement. And then in the evenings they would talk, sharing their thoughts and dreams and fears. Samuel told her about growing up in Texas, about his complicated relationship with his father, who had wanted him to be something he was not, about his mother's death, and the grief that still sometimes caught him off guard. Adelaide told him about her mother, the shadowy figure she barely remembered, about the loneliness of her childhood, about the books that had saved her sanity by showing her there were worlds beyond her father's narrow vision. They were careful not to give the ranch hands anything to gossip about, aware that Adelaide's reputation was already compromised by her presence at the ranch. But sometimes, late at night when everyone else was asleep, they would meet on the porch and sit close together, their shoulders touching, their hands intertwined. And sometimes Samuel would kiss her, soft and sweet, and Adelaide would feel like she was discovering something entirely new, something that belonged only to her. "I never knew it could be like this," she told him one night in August, the two of them sitting under a sky full of stars. "I never knew that caring for someone could feel like freedom instead of a trap." "That is because real love does not trap," Samuel said. "It opens doors, it makes you more yourself, not less." "Is that what this is?" Adelaide asked, her heart beating fast. "Love." Samuel turned to look at her, his face serious in the starlight. "For me, it is. I love you, Adelaide Jameson. I love your courage and your intelligence and your terrible aim with a rifle. I love the way you throw yourself into learning new things, the way you never give up even when something is hard. I love talking to you and being quiet with you and imagining a future where we can do both as much as we want." He cupped her face gently in his rough palm. "I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a few months, but I am as sure of this as I have ever been of anything." Adelaide felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, tears of joy and relief and wonder. "I love you too," she said, the words feeling both foreign and perfect on her tongue. "I did not think I was capable of love, not after growing up the way I did. But you showed me I was wrong. You showed me that I can trust someone, that I can let someone in without losing myself." Samuel kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Adelaide let herself fall into it, into him, into the promise of a future that was finally hers to choose. By September, Adelaide could pass for a reasonably experienced drover, at least to anyone who was not looking too closely. She could ride for hours without complaining, rope with decent accuracy, and handle cattle with growing confidence. Ruth had given her a set of men's clothes that fit properly, and with her hair tucked up under a hat, she looked like any young cowboy. "You have come a long way," Ruth told her the night before Samuel was due to return to the bar cross to prepare for the drive. "When you first showed up here, you could barely stay on a horse. Now you are ready to ride to California. I am proud of you, Adelaide." The words meant more to Adelaide than Ruth probably realized. Pride had never been part of her father's vocabulary when it came to her. Only disappointment, only lectures about how she fell short of what a proper Christian woman should be. Hearing Ruth say she was proud felt like a benediction, a blessing on the choice Adelaide had made to run. "Thank you," Adelaide said, "for everything. For taking me in, for protecting me, for helping me become someone who can protect herself." "You were always that person," Ruth said. "You just needed the chance to become her." She paused, then added, "Samuel is a good man, Adelaide, but make sure this is what you want. Make sure you are not running to him just because you ran from Cornelius. Your life should be about what you want, not about men at all." "I know," Adelaide said. "And I do want this. Want him. But Ruth, I also want to finish my education, maybe work in my aunt's business if she will have me. I want to see the ocean and read all the books I was never allowed to read and make decisions about my own life. Samuel and I have talked about this. He understands that I am not looking for another person to tell me what to do or who to be." Ruth nodded, satisfied. "Good. Then I wish you both happiness. And Adelaide, if things do not work out in California, if you ever need a place to come back to, you have one here. Always." The cattle drive was set to depart in early October. 200 head of cattle being driven from the Bar Cross Ranch to the railhead outside Los Angeles, a journey of over 400 miles that would take about 6 weeks. Samuel had arranged for Adelaide to join the crew as Alex Jenkins, a young drover from Texas new to the territory. The foreman was suspicious at first, but Samuel vouched for Alex's skills, and a few demonstrations of roping and riding convinced the man that this new hand would pull his weight. Adelaide bound her breasts, cut her hair shorter, and practiced lowering her voice and walking with a more masculine gait. Samuel coached her on how to talk and act around the other drovers, how to avoid situations that might reveal her identity. It was dangerous, and they both knew it, but it was also their best chance of getting Adelaide out of the territory without being recognized. The drive began on a cool October morning, the cattle moving out in a long stream under a clear blue sky. Adelaide rode drag at the back of the herd with 2 other young cowboys, eating dust and keeping the stragglers moving. It was exhausting, dirty work, and by the end of the first day, Adelaide understood why Samuel had trained her so hard. Without that preparation, she never would have made it. The crew consisted of 15 drovers plus the foreman and the cook. Most of them were experienced cattlemen who had been working together for years, but there were a few new faces besides Adelaide, which made it easier for her to blend in. She kept to herself as much as possible, staying quiet during meals, avoiding the card games and roughhousing that the men engaged in during their limited free time. Samuel had warned her that being too friendly would invite scrutiny, but being unfriendly would make the men suspicious. It was a delicate balance. Samuel himself could not show her any special attention without raising questions, so they barely spoke beyond what was necessary for the work. But Adelaide would catch him watching her sometimes, checking that she was all right, and the concern in his eyes sustained her through the long, hard days. They drove the cattle west through changing terrain, from the high desert into the low mountains, following old trails that generations of cattle had worn into the land. It rained twice, cold autumn rain that soaked through Adelaide's clothes and made sleeping on the ground miserable. She learned to function on minimal sleep, grabbing a few hours whenever she could between shifts watching the herd. She learned to eat quickly, to tend blisters and saddle sores without complaining, to keep going when her body screamed for rest. And she learned that she was stronger than she had ever imagined. 2 weeks into the drive, they camped near a small settlement where some of the drovers went to buy supplies and have a few drinks. Adelaide stayed with the herd, knowing that going into town was too risky. Samuel stayed too, claiming he did not care for drinking, and they found themselves alone on watch while the others were gone. "How are you holding up?" Samuel asked quietly, riding close enough that they could talk without being overheard by the few remaining drovers on the far side of the herd. "I am surviving," Adelaide said, "though I am not sure I will ever be clean again." Samuel smiled. "You are doing better than surviving. You are doing great. The foreman told me yesterday that Alex Jenkins was a good hand, steady and reliable. That is high praise from him." Adelaide felt a flush of pride. "I just do not want to let you down." "You could never let me down," Samuel said seriously. "Adelaide, I know this is hard. I know you are exhausted and uncomfortable and probably wondering why you agreed to this plan, but we are over halfway there. Another 2, maybe 3 weeks and we will reach California. Then you will be free, really free. Whitmore and your father will never find you there." "And then what?" Adelaide asked. "What happens to us once we reach California?" Samuel was quiet for a moment. "That depends on what you want." "I told the Bar Cross this would be my last drive for them. I have money saved, enough to start small somewhere. I was thinking maybe California would be a good place to do that. But Adelaide, I do not want you to feel pressured. If you want to go to San Francisco and start your own life, separate from me, I will understand. Your freedom matters more than what I want." Adelaide looked at him. This man who had upended his entire life to help her, who had never once made her feel obligated or trapped. "What if what I want is a life that includes you? Not as someone who controls me or tells me what to do, but as a partner. Someone I choose to be with because I want to be with him." Samuel's face broke into a smile, hope and joy lighting his features. "Is that what you want?" "It is," Adelaide said. "Samuel, these last few months with you have shown me what a real partnership could look like. How 2 people can support each other without one dominating the other. I do not want to lose that. I do not want to lose you." "You will never lose me," Samuel promised. "Whatever we build in California, we will build it together. As equals. As partners." They could not embrace, not with the other drovers potentially watching, but they looked at each other across the small distance between their horses, and Adelaide felt the promise settle into her bones. She had run from a forced marriage to a monster, and she had found something infinitely better. Love freely given and freely returned. A partnership built on respect and trust. a future she could shape with her own hands. The rest of the drive passed in a blur of dusty days and cold nights, of early mornings and late watches, of steady progress west. They crossed the Colorado River without losing any cattle, navigated mountain passes, as the weather grew colder, and finally descended into California in the third week of October. The railhead town was rough and booming, full of cattlemen and railroad workers and entrepreneurs looking to make their fortune. The bar-cross foreman concluded the business of selling the cattle to the railroad agent, paid off the drovers, and announced that those who wanted to return to Arizona should be ready to leave in 2 days. Samuel found Adelaide after she had collected her wages, standing at the edge of town looking west toward the distant coast. $30, she said, showing him the money the foreman had paid her. I earned this myself, doing work that mattered. Samuel, I have never had money that was truly mine before. It is a good feeling, is it not? Samuel said, knowing you can take care of yourself. The best feeling. Adelaide tucked the money carefully into her pocket. So, we are in California. What now? Now we get you to San Francisco. There is a stage that runs north from here, leaves tomorrow morning. It is a 2-day trip, maybe 3 depending on the roads. Samuel paused. Adelaide, are you sure you want me to come with you? Your aunt does not know me. She might not want a stranger showing up with you. You are not a stranger. You are the man I love, and I want my family to know you. Adelaide took his hand, no longer caring who might see. Besides, we are partners now. We do this together. They took the stage north the next day, leaving behind Alex Jenkins and Adelaide's brief career as a cowboy. Adelaide changed back into women's clothes, though she kept the practical split skirt and boots that allowed for easier movement than the restrictive fashion she had grown up wearing. With each mile they traveled north, away from Arizona and her father's reach, she felt lighter. San Francisco was overwhelming after months in the open country. The noise, the crowds, the buildings packed close together all made Adelaide feel dizzy and disoriented. But it was also exciting, full of possibility and energy. Women walked the streets unescorted, wearing fashions Adelaide had only seen in forbidden magazines. Shops advertised goods from around the world. The ocean spread out to the west, vast and blue and entirely beyond her experience. Finding her aunt proved easier than expected. Catherine Jameson had kept her maiden name after being widowed, and she ran a successful dress shop in a respectable neighborhood. When Adelaide walked into the shop with Samuel at her side, a woman in her 50s looked up from where she was showing fabric to a customer, and her face went white. Adelaide, she said, sounding stunned. Little Adelaide, Aunt Catherine, Adelaide said, and felt tears spring to her eyes. I know I should have written first, should have warned you I was coming. But I had to leave Ash Fork quickly, and I had nowhere else to go. Catherine made her excuses to her customer and ushered Adelaide and Samuel into the back room of the shop. There, surrounded by bolts of fabric and half-finished dresses, Adelaide told her aunt everything. About her father's arrangement with Cornelius Whitmore, about her escape, about Samuel's help and Ruth's protection, and the long journey to California. Catherine listened with an expression that shifted from shock to anger to fierce pride. When Adelaide finished, her aunt pulled her into a tight embrace. I have thought about you every day since your father refused to let you come live with me, Catherine said, her voice thick with emotion. I have prayed you were all right, that he was not being too harsh with you, and all this time you were planning your own escape. My brave, brilliant girl. I am sorry I brought trouble to your door, Adelaide said. If father finds out I am here. Your father and I have not spoken in 15 years. He has no idea where I live or how to contact me. And even if he did, Adelaide, you are an adult, He cannot force you to return to him." Catherine pulled back to look at Adelaide seriously. "You are safe here. I will make sure of it." She insisted that both Adelaide and Samuel stay with her in her apartment above the shop, at least until they figured out their next steps. Over dinner that night, Catherine asked Samuel about his intentions. "I love your niece," Samuel said simply. "I want to marry her if she will have me. But more than that, I want to support whatever life she wants to build. If she wants to work with you in the dress shop, I will find work elsewhere to support us. If she wants to go to school or travel or do anything else, I will help make that happen. My job is not to direct her life. It is to be her partner in whatever direction she chooses." Catherine looked at Adelaide. "Is this what you want?" Adelaide took Samuel's hand on top of the table, no longer hiding their connection. "It is." "Aunt Catherine, I know this must seem sudden, and I know my reputation is probably beyond repair. But Samuel and we have been through something together. He has seen me at my worst and still loves me. And I love him. I want to marry him, to build a life with him. But I also want to work to learn to be my own person. And he understands that." "Then you have my blessing," Catherine said. "And Adelaide, your reputation is not beyond repair because you have done nothing wrong. You escaped a forced marriage to a dangerous man. You made a choice about your own life. That is not a scandal. That is courage." Samuel and Adelaide were married a week later in a small ceremony at the church Catherine attended, with Catherine and the owner of the neighboring bookshop as witnesses. Adelaide wore a simple dress of blue calico that Catherine had made for her, and Samuel wore his best shirt and a new vest. There was no crowd of obligated church members, no father giving her away like property, no Cornelius waiting to claim his prize. Just Adelaide and Samuel, choosing each other freely, promising to be partners in the life they would build together. After the wedding, they rented a small house in the city, modest but their own. Samuel found work at a stable, using his skills with horses to earn steady wages. Adelaide worked with her aunt in the dress shop, learning the business and discovering she had a talent for design. Catherine taught her the practical aspects of running a business, and Adelaide soaked up the knowledge like she had once soaked up forbidden books. But Adelaide also enrolled in evening classes at a school for women, studying literature and mathematics and history, all the subjects her father had deemed unnecessary for a woman. Samuel encouraged her education, helped her with homework when she struggled, celebrated her successes. Their marriage was everything a partnership should be, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. A year after they arrived in California, Adelaide received a letter. It had been forwarded through several addresses, and the handwriting was unfamiliar. Inside was a single page from Ruth Holloway. "Adelaide," it read, "I hope this letter finds you well and happy. I wanted to let you know that your father and Cornelius Whitmore finally gave up the search for you about 6 months back. Word is that your father told the congregation you had died in the desert, and he held a memorial service. So officially, Adelaide Jameson is dead, which means no one is looking for you anymore. You are truly free. I hope you and Samuel are doing well. If you ever want to visit, you know where to find me. Ruth." Adelaide showed the letter to Samuel that evening, and they held each other close, relief and joy washing over them. The shadow that had hung over Adelaide since she ran from her wedding, the fear that her father would somehow find her and drag her back, finally lifted completely. "You are free," Samuel said, echoing Ruth's words. "Really, truly free." "We both are," Adelaide corrected. "Free to build whatever life we want," and they did. Over the next several years, Adelaide and Samuel built a life that was entirely their own. Adelaide learned the dress business and eventually became Catherine's partner in the shop. Samuel saved enough money to buy a small stable, providing horses and tack to people in the city. They bought a larger house, still modest but comfortable. They traveled when they could, taking trips up the coast and into the mountains, seeing the country Adelaide had never been allowed to explore. And in 1887, 3 years after Adelaide ran from her wedding, she gave birth to their first child, a boy they named Henry Samuel Pierce. He had his father's gray eyes and his mother's auburn hair, and he was loved fiercely by both parents and by his great-aunt Catherine, who spoiled him shamelessly. 2 years later came a daughter, Elizabeth Catherine Pierce, with her father's steady temperament and her mother's sharp mind. And 3 years after that, another son, Thomas Josiah Pierce, named after neither grandfather but carrying their names transformed by the love of the family he was born into. Adelaide raised her children to be independent thinkers, to question authority, to understand that their worth came from who they were, not from blind obedience to tradition. Samuel taught them to ride and work with animals, but he also taught them compassion and the importance of helping those who needed it. Together, Adelaide and Samuel created a home where children were valued for their unique selves, where mistakes were learning opportunities rather than sins, where love was freely given rather than conditionally earned. Catherine lived to see all 3 great nieces and nephews born, and she died peacefully in her sleep at 72, leaving the dress shop to Adelaide. Adelaide renamed it Catherine's Legacy, in honor of the aunt who had given her a second chance at life. Sometimes, Adelaide would think about the day she ran from her wedding, about the terror and desperation that had driven her into that canyon. She would think about Samuel finding her, about his simple decision to help a stranger that had changed both their lives. And she would think about the woman she had been then, scared but determined, ready to risk everything for the chance to be free. That woman seemed very far away now. Adelaide Pierce was confident, capable, the successful owner of a thriving business, the mother of 3 remarkable children, the wife of a man who loved her as an equal. But she never forgot where she had come from, never forgot the cage her father had tried to keep her in, never forgot that her freedom had come at a cost. So when young women came to the shop looking for work, especially women with haunted eyes and defensive postures, Adelaide hired them. She gave them fair wages and respected their privacy and asked no questions about their pasts. She figured she owed it to that scared girl in the canyon, to Mary Whitmore who had not escaped, to all the women trapped in situations they could not control. And sometimes, when a woman seemed particularly desperate, particularly in need of help, Adelaide would tell her story. About the preacher's daughter who ran from an arranged marriage, about the cowboy who hid her in the canyon, about how they had found love and freedom together. She would tell them that escape was possible, that a different life was possible, that they deserved to choose their own path. Some women listened and left, and Adelaide never saw them again. But some listened and stayed and found their own versions of freedom in the city by the bay. And Adelaide would give them what Catherine had given her, and Samuel had given her, and Ruth had given her. A chance. Just a chance to become who they were meant to be. In 1895, more than 10 years after Adelaide ran from her wedding, she received word that Cornelius Whitmore had died. The letter came from an unexpected source, a lawyer in Ashfork who had been going through Whitmore's affairs. Apparently, Cornelius had never remarried after Adelaide's disappearance, had become increasingly reclusive and bitter, and had finally drunk himself to death at 59 years old. The lawyer was contacting Adelaide because Whitmore had written her name in his papers, along with accusations of theft and abandonment. He wanted Adelaide to know that any claims Whitmore might have made against her had died with him. Adelaide read the letter once, then burned it. She felt nothing for Cornelius Whitmore except a distant pity for a man who had been so consumed by the need to own and control that he had destroyed himself. She was glad he was dead, glad he could never hurt another woman the way he had hurt Mary. But mostly, she just felt grateful that she had escaped him, that she had found her way to this life, this family, this version of herself. Samuel found her standing by the fireplace, watching the letter turn to ash. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and she leaned into his solid warmth. "You all right?" he asked. "I am perfect," Adelaide said and meant it. "I was just thinking about how different my life is from what it would have been if I had married him, if I had not run." "But you did run," Samuel reminded her. "You were brave enough to choose yourself." "We chose each other," Adelaide corrected. "And we have built something beautiful." She turned in his arms to face him, this man who had given her freedom and love and partnership, who had never once made her regret her choice. His hair was starting to gray at the temples, and there were lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, but he was still the same Samuel who had found her in the canyon, who had seen her and helped her and loved her. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For everything. For hiding me in the canyon, for helping me escape, for teaching me to be strong, for loving me, for giving me this life." She stretched up to kiss him. "For being exactly who you are." Samuel smiled against her lips. "That goes both ways, you know. You saved me just as much as I saved you. Before I met you, I was just drifting, working for other people's dreams. You gave me purpose. You gave me a reason to build something of my own." They stood together in their home, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had created, and Adelaide felt complete in a way she had never imagined possible. She had started with nothing but fear and determination, had built everything from that desperate run into the canyon. And now she had everything that mattered: freedom, love, family, purpose. Years later, when Adelaide and Samuel were old and gray, sitting on the porch of their San Francisco home watching their grandchildren play in the yard, someone would ask Adelaide if she had any regrets. If she wished things had been easier, wished she had not had to run, wished she had not had to risk everything for her freedom. And Adelaide would smile and take Samuel's weathered hand in hers and say no. She would say that the hard road was the one that led her here, to this life, to this love, to this version of herself. She would say that she was grateful for every difficult step, every moment of fear and uncertainty, because it had all been worth it to become the woman she was meant to be. The preacher's daughter had run from an arranged marriage. A cowboy had hidden her in the canyon. And together, they had found something that Reverend Jameson and Cornelius Whitmore and all the men who thought they could control women's lives had never understood: that real love does not constrain, it liberates. That true partnership is not about ownership, but about two people choosing, every day, to build a life together. Adelaide Pierce had made her choice that day in 1884 when she threw herself from a horse and stumbled into a canyon wearing her wedding dress. And every day since, she had kept choosing, kept building, kept living the life that was authentically hers. It had not always been easy. It had not always been safe. But it had been hers, and that made all the difference. In the end, that was all any of them could hope for: to live a life that was truly their own, to love and be loved freely, to build something meaningful with the time they were given. Adelaide and Samuel had done that. They had taken a desperate moment in a red rock canyon and transformed it into a lifetime of shared joy and purpose. And when they were finally laid to rest side by side many years later, their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered to remember them, telling stories of the preacher's daughter, who had the courage to run, and the cowboy who had the compassion to help her. They told stories of a love that had built something lasting, something that had rippled forward through generations, teaching each one that freedom and love and choice were worth fighting for. The headstone was simple, carved with both their names and a single line that Samuel had chosen. "Together, we chose freedom." And beneath the ground in that San Francisco cemetery, Adelaide and Samuel Pierce rested together, just as they had lived together, partners in every sense, two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment and built a beautiful life from that chance meeting in a canyon long ago. Their story became family legend, passed down through the generations. The great-great-grandchildren who never knew them still heard about Adelaide's daring escape and Samuel's quiet heroism, about the long journey to California and the life they built there. And some of those descendants, when faced with their own difficult choices, would remember their ancestors' courage and find strength in it. Would remember that sometimes the right path was the hard one, that sometimes you had to risk everything to be free, that sometimes love meant giving someone space to become fully themselves. That was Adelaide and Samuel's real legacy. Not just the business or the house or the money they left behind, but the example of a life lived authentically, a love built on respect and equality, a partnership that empowered both people to be their best selves. They had started with almost nothing, just two people in a canyon with no clear path forward, and they had built everything from that beginning. It was a good life, a true life, a chosen life, and in the end, that was what mattered most.